Hi, and welcome to Running on Carbs Podcast. I am your host, Coach Val, and I'd like to welcome you to episode number 22 of the podcast. Today, we are going to talk about a book that I absolutely love. I've been using the exercises and the programs from this book for a couple of years now. And that was from the first edition. And now there is a second edition. And the book that I'm talking about is called Running Rewired by author Jay Dicharry. Jay Dicharry is a physical therapist and a board certified sports clinical specialist. And he has written the book Running Rewired, as well as a couple of other books, at least one other book that I'm aware of on anatomy of the runner. Forgive me if I don't have that name exactly right. But he is written a second edition of Running Rewired just recently that just came out in 2024. And I contemplated whether or not I needed to pick up that book or not. And I am so glad that I decided to purchase the book after all, because I thought, well, what could possibly be the difference between the first edition and the second edition? And so he is making the rounds on a lot of different podcasts right now. And so I listened to a couple of his interviews on those podcasts and realized that there's probably quite a bit in that second edition that I might want to look into and hear more about. And so I did decide to pick up the book. And when I say pick up the book, I am not a physical book reader. I like a Kindle version. So I'm always reading on my Kindle Fire. And so I downloaded the new edition. And in that book, there's a number of different it's kind of reorganized a little bit in the chapter outline. So it looks like there's many more chapters when really I think there's just a couple more. But there are a couple of chapters specifically that I really enjoyed. Also, he's added a section on the Mobo board, which I am a huge fan of and have been using for a number of years. So, real back to Jay, though. Jay is an interesting character, and if you have an opportunity to listen to any of the podcasts that he's been on where he's been interviewed, I highly recommend that you listen because he's a really sharp guy and really knows his stuff. He just absolutely lives for this information about biomechanics. He calls himself a biomechanics nerd, and I love anybody that can just nerd out on what they do. So if you have an opportunity to listen to one of his interviews or a couple of his interviews, I definitely recommend that you do that. You'll pick up different information. And today's podcast that I'm going to share with you is a totally different perspective. I'm not coming at it from the perspective of his book because he can do that far better than I can. I'm coming at it today from a user's perspective, from a recreational runner's perspective, and how I use the information from his book and the exercises and workouts in my everyday training. And so I thought that's something that you might like to see and hear about from a runner's perspective on how to use these workouts. So when I get into the meat of the show, then that's what we're going to be talking about today. So some of the notable differences that I noticed between the first edition and the second edition of the book is there's a chapter on called Building Better Parts, and that's in chapter 9. And I love that chapter. I keep coming back to it because there's so much good information in there, and I just keep kind of rereading bits and pieces of it as I'm kind of perusing the book. To me, this book isn't one that you just kind of read straight through. There's parts of it you can read straight through, but then there's a value to coming back and rereading pieces of it because for me, at least, it's rather technical in some cases. And some of the information is repeat from my training in other certifications that I have. So some of my run coaching certifications, I've heard some of the information he's sharing, like the lower cross syndrome and things like that. I've heard about that in my other studies. And then also he talks about the building better part. Let me go back to the building better parts. I'm getting totally ahead of myself because I'm kind of excited about it. So I've been wanting to do this podcast, by the way, for a very long time. Since before I knew about the second edition, I knew I wanted to do a podcast episode on Running Rewired workouts and the mobile board. From the very beginning, before I even started, I knew that this was a topic I wanted to talk about. So I'm really excited today. Okay, so as a runner, so in chapter 9, Building Better Parts, he talks about ask a runner why running is good for them. So ask any runner, why do you run? Why is running good for you? And their answer oftentimes is to develop fitness and to build a strong body. And he's like, okay, it sounds good, right? But then ask a physical therapist or a biomechanics nerd, and what will their answer be? Their answer to why running is good for a runner, it'll be to build fitness. If you were to say, what about build stronger body? That would be like at the very bottom of the list, if it was even on the list at all. So running is not how we build stronger bodies. It is how we build fitness, though. And so the building the strong body so that you can run and build fitness, I think, is a better building block structure than combining the two. And so what Running Rewired does is helps you to build that structure, that proper biomechanics, so that you can continue running healthy. And this podcast, I often, I'm talking to women who are similar to me, in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and our bodies don't operate the same way as they did in, say, our 20s. And even if they did operate in those similar ways, women's bodies, female bodies operate different than male bodies. And as a lot of us know, studies that have been done on athletes are often done at the elite level on men. And so those studies don't really relate to how our bodies work. And so we need to focus on making sure our bodies are strong and healthy to support our running activities. And in that chapter, so after he asks that question and people start giving their answers, it's like we really need to ask better questions. So it isn't so much about, why are you running, a certain way and this and that, but to really encourage us to ask the better questions about our fitness level, about our strength, and about what we are doing. And I've already come back to this chapter so many times. There's just so much good stuff. So if you get this book, definitely flip to chapter 9 and read about building better parts. He's also added a section on prehab exercises. So that's new. And this includes information about bone and tendon loading workouts. And coming back from a stress fracture in my particular scenario and having proximal hamstring tendinopathy, I really relate to this chapter on prehab exercises. And what's interesting is that the exercises that he's provided in this prehab section are the exercises that I was released from physical therapy doing. So that was where I progressed up to the point where I was no longer, or it was no longer beneficial or necessary to go to physical therapy anymore. Instead, I was simply released with these strength, bone building, tendon structuring, or strengthening workout exercises. So things like the hamstring curl on a big exercise ball. That's one of the exercises that I was released to do after physical therapy, to do as ongoing strengthening. And that's one of the prehab exercises that's mentioned in the book. And there's a couple of others also. He also added mobile board exercises, which when I first got the first edition of the book, I already had a mobile board, and I was hoping that there would be exercises in that book that would support my work on the mobile board, but it didn't. So I don't know if that book came out before the mobile board or, in tandem. I'm not sure. But either way, there wasn't anything in the first edition for the mobile board. So they were kind of separate, which was weird because they really are supportive of each other. So now there are exercises in there using the mobile board, which Jay is the inventor of that board. And the mobile board, I'll take a sidebar here. The mobile board is like a little disc. It's very different than your traditional balance board that you might have seen that has like a little wobbly disc in the middle and you just kind of got to balance on it. I mean, that's a 2-foot exercise. And in running, we aren't on 2 feet, we're always on 1 foot. And so balance and mobility, proprioception, foot strength, kinetic chain, strength all the way up the kinetic chain is really important for proper biomechanics. And so the mobile board trains the foot in a way that is sound for running, and it also strengthens the big toe, which is your propulsion and balance. And so the mobile board has a place for your foot, but then it's got a hole, and you put your big toe next to the hole and you let the other 4 toes just fall into the hole. And the reason for that is that you can't use those toes to give your foot balance. And so you have to use your big toe for that power and balance in order to keep you properly situated on the board as you go through the exercises. And so it's very effective, and it's surprising when you first get on this board. I was actually a little afraid of it when I first got it. I was afraid it was going to fall over. But it was fine. You just catch yourself with the other foot. So don't worry about it. If you were kind of worried, don't worry. So anyway, when you stand on it, it seems also deceivingly simple too. So it's a little of both, like a little afraid of it, but then on the other hand, you're like, oh, I can do this. This is easy. Well, try the tippy bird exercise and then come back and tell me if you think it's easy, because the tippy bird exercise is the one I still struggle with all the time. And I'm not going to go through it right now because it's way too hard to describe. But you're like in, 1 foot forward, like a warrior position. And then you got to like move your torso while you're balancing on 1 foot with only your big toe for your structure. It's challenging, but very effective. And you feel it all the way up to your hips and even in your core on some of these exercises. But the mobile board, it trains proprioception, which is like your body in space, essentially, muscular strength, mobility, and balance, all in the foot and in that kinetic chain going up from the foot all the way to the hip. So that is like chapter 9. Absolutely fantastic chapter. Skip right to it if you want to, but come back and read the rest of it. So, because in chapter 2 is also a fantastic chapter. And chapter 2 is all about the mind-body connection. And it's called Troubleshoot Broken Wiring. And this is where I did have some crossover from my personal training certification. It talks about the neuroplasticity of the brain. And it's kind of like that's the rewired part of the book. It's the rewired is literally the wiring of your brain connection to your body. And on this podcast, I talk a lot about the mind-body connection. And it's absolutely imperative for a runner to have that connection, but also to train properly. Because if you are training in a speedy fashion, you're just trying to rush through it and get through the exercises, it doesn't connect your body to your mind and vice versa. And so you could be training yourself in an inappropriate manner. So you might be training yourself to do the exercises in an inefficient way. And over time, you'll just continue to do that in an inefficient way. And if you're imbalanced, that could lead to injury. And so when you're doing the exercises that I'll talk about in the book, it's important to do them slowly and correctly. If you are rushing through them like the tippy bird and you're just falling all over the place, it's not going to help. It's just going to teach your body to fall all over the place rather than stay balanced on the board. So it's better to reduce the range of motion of an exercise that you struggle with and get that right, and then slowly progress to the next level than it is to just try to do it in the full motion and keep falling over, or compensate in other muscles instead of the ones that you're supposed to be using, because that's just going to teach your body to compensate and you won't get anything out of the actual exercise. So we're wiring the brain to recognize correct movements, not the incorrect ones. Um, the it's let's see. Oh, it's not about. So that was the other thing, is that it's not about changing your gait either. We hear that a lot, like, "Oh, my gait right?" Or I feel like my gait is off. Well, maybe your gait is off, but is it always that way? Or is it actually, like, off because you're overcompensating in some way? So this is not about changing any of that. Whatever is working is working. What you're trying to do with these exercises is to learn proper movement patterns. And so by training this way, you're learning those proper movement patterns in an and as a effect of that, or consequence of that, a positive consequence, your gait may change, but that's only because you're doing it right. And so if your gait changes by learning proper movement patterns, then that's a positive, and that is what you're looking for. So here's how I incorporate Running Rewired workouts in my own program. And there's a lot of other workouts in the book, and I haven't even gotten to all of them yet, but I narrowed down and zoned in on the ones that I know that I need. And that's one way to start with the book and the exercises. So I know when I first read the first edition, I was a bit overwhelmed because there was just all these workouts. I'm like, well, where do you start? Because in the book, he doesn't say, do, this workout, then do this, then do that. He's really just laid out all of these programs for um, and exercises in a way that these are the exercises you can do for these results. If you want to strengthen your core, here's some exercises. Here's a workout, using these exercises. But then there's extra ones in there, extra exercises that aren't in those workouts. And so you use these in a manner that you need and that your body needs. So I focus on the hip circuit because I did have a hip stress fracture, and that's an area that I know is a weakness for me. And so I want to make sure that my hips are strong um, for for my running and to support my running. So I use the hip circuit now as a pre-run warm up. And this is something that he recommended in the book. And so I thought, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to do this and see how I feel compared to my normal dynamic warm up that I've been doing for a long time. And there's nothing wrong with my dynamic warm up, it works great. But I wanted to see, do I feel better using the Running Rewired, more specific exercises? And I have to say that, spoiler alert, I do. So I incorporate the Running Rewired hip circuit along with a couple of other exercises that he recommends. So, what I do for my warm up is I do the 9 exercises that are in the hip circuit. I hate the burpees. There are 10 burpees with a push up in that warm up. Fair warning. I hate them. The first time I did it, I did 5. I'm like, "Oh, this is a lot of work." And then I went, "Okay, well, I can do 3 more." So I did 8, and then now I do all 10. So, it's okay. Give yourself grace. We talk about that a lot here, right? Give yourself grace. It's okay if you start off slow and then build. Um, so I do all the burpees now. I also add in a couple of Mobo board foot workout foot moves. So I'll do the foot rocks on each foot in the different slots. And that's how I warm up my shins and ankles and everything before a run. I also incorporate the inverted calf raises, and I use a weight. So it doesn't show a weight in the book, but I am working on strengthening my calves because I've had some shin issues recently, and it is helping a lot. So, you can do this off of a step also, but I use the board because it puts your foot at a different angle. It puts your foot starting at an inverted angle with your toes up because it's your heel is lower than your toes, and then you're raising up, and it's just a more natural position, I think, rather than off of a step. So anyway, that's what I do, and I hold a weight in one arm or one hand, and then when I switch feet, I hold it in the other. And I also add a single leg deadlift with a kettlebell, with a heavy kettlebell, and that is specifically for my proximal hamstring tendinopathy that I am working on. It helps a lot to put load on that tendon before I run. And it's not a lot of load. I just do 10 on each leg, but it's a way to get the tendon activated so that when I'm on my run, it's not trying to do something that it's not ready for. So it activates the tendon so that I can go out on my run, and it's been very helpful. As a matter of fact, the tendon pain that I've had in the past is way lower. I've had very minimal flare-ups recently. I think last week I might have had one, and I would have rated the pain and stiffness at like maybe a 2. So it was really minimal. And so the exercises that I am doing on tendon loading has really been helpful. Um, the next workout that I am incorporating is the sling workout, sling circuit, I think is what it's called in the book. And I'm using this as my cross training day warm up. And the reason for that is because the sling for me, it's like a TRX brand system, but I don't use the branded TRX. I use an off brand. So it's I call it a sling. There might be a different name for it. Um, but they are like suspension trainer. That's what it's called, suspension trainers. Um, and that's been really good, but I use that on my cross training day, which is Sunday, because um, the straps are so hard to work with, in my opinion. It might just be that I'm not used to them. I've only used them once or twice, and they're not quite super quick, and I've got to pull out my pull-up bar because I hang them on the pull-up bar. So, I mean, it's just a little more effort. So anyway, I do it on a day when I have extra time. If yours is all set up and ready to go, that's great. Um, there's one exercise in there, so I have a favorite. My favorite exercise is it's called the rotisserie chicken, but being that I am plant-based and this is a plant-based podcast, I've decided to rename this exercise. So this exercise shall be here called the reverse plank hip drop. So if you hear me refer to it, that's what it is. So it's the reverse plank hip drop. That's my favorite one. And I would say that the hardest exercise that I did was the push-ups. So using the suspension trainer in a push-up position, I nearly fell on my face the first time I did it. I went all the way down like a regular, like full range of motion push-up, and I couldn't even push myself back up. I started to do it, and the bands just like went out to the side, and I practically fell on my face. So careful. Maybe do 1 or 2 on your knees first just to kinda get the feel for it and to know how strong your core is, so you don't fall on your face like I did. I almost fell on my face, not fully, just almost. So anyway, those were definitely the hardest for me. So I have room for improvement. That is how we look at it when we talk about training. It was not a failure. There was room for improvement. So anyway, what I did was, of course, whenever an exercise is too hard in full range of motion, what do? We back off the range of motion. And so I just went down like halfway. And so I could get a real feel for the exercise. And I would say that by the time I got to about 8 of 10, I was able to go down maybe 3/4 of the way range of motion. So I was definitely getting better even just at that moment, but the exercise movement for my body was just so unique. My body's like, "What are you doing to me? I don't know what to do with this movement pattern." So that kind of goes back to the rewired part that we were talking about earlier. You have to rewire the brain to understand proper movement pattern. So I'm definitely right in the thick of it. So the other things that I've been doing is I've been working on some drill work. And there's with drill work, it's not like your old-fashioned running drills, like the A skips and the B skips. If you've been a runner for a long time, you're familiar with those track warm-up movements. The drill work in the book is more about like posture check, for example, which is one that I've been doing. So on my run this weekend, on my long run, I incorporated the posture check during a run. And the way that you do this is you run for a mile-ish, somewhere around a mile, and then you stop and you balance on one foot and you check your balance position on your foot. Like, where is your body weight? Is it on the heel? So you want to make sure that it's evenly distributed on your foot as you're standing in your running position. So it's kind of like you're in your high knee on one side and then balanced on one foot, and you kind of have your arms in running position, just at an angle at your side, just to feel your position. And then you switch legs, check your other leg and your other foot position. And from there, you put your hands down straight to your side with your palms facing forward, slide your shoulder blades down your back. So you have nice, good, upright posture. And then you get into running position, you start to lean forward and you go into your next mile. So it's just a little way to check your positioning and your posture and make sure you're upright and straight. I have to say that on my long run, I haven't been feeling very well lately, just a lot of fatigue, and so my heart rate is a little bit higher and during my runs, and so it was a nice way to every mile or so pause for, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds just to kind of bring the heart rate down, check my posture, and then just boom, take right back off again. So it was a nice exercise in that sense too. The other one that I am doing is the fingertip posture drill. And this is one you don't have to stop for. You could just keep going on your run. You place your pinky on your hip bone, like right in the front that you can feel, and your thumb on one of your ribs. And you can do this just with one hand. So, like, I'm oftentimes holding a water bottle, one of those handhelds, in one hand. So, whatever free hand I have, I will do this. And you want to check that you have good posture and a neutral spine during a run. But this is something that you can check throughout the day. And I actually encourage you to check it throughout the day, just every once in a while. While you're sitting, do you have good posture? While you're standing, maybe in line at the grocery store or something, you can check your posture. And then while you're running. And so the more familiar you get with that feeling of your neutral spine, then the better posture you will have. Because again, we're rewiring our brains for proper movement. Then the better posture you'll have during your runs. So the next thing I do is every week I do strength training twice a week. And a lot of times now, I'm not taking a full workout for my strength training usually from the book, but I'm incorporating a number of the exercises from the book. Like I said, in the book, you have all these individual exercises, so you can put them into your programs where you need strengthening and more work in those areas. Or you can put together like these precision workouts that I was just talking about with the hip circuits and things like that. So for my strength training, I incorporate the individual exercises along with plyo and heavy weights. So some of the exercises that I have been using, and check the book out to see what exercises you might need for your weaknesses. But some of the ones that I've been using are the ball bridge twist. That's for core stability. So you lay on a big exercise ball, and you have your arms kind of straight up over your chest, up in front of you. And you've got your feet on the floor. So you're just like laying on the ball. And then you twist to each side while you have your arms out. And it's a big, or not big, but it's a small movement in some cases because you have to stay balanced on this ball that's like moving below you, and the only thing holding you in place are your feet. So, it's all in the upper body in the twist. I also like to use that same big ball for the Super Swiss side plank. And this is again a core exercise. Whew, these are tough because you do 25 on each side. So it's a side plank lift basically with a big stability ball between your feet. And so you're on your side, you have this massive stability ball between your feet, and then you're lifting your hips, off the ground in a side plank. The balance is real. Absolutely. So when I haven't been doing this a lot, my balance is all over the place. I have to stop and reset a couple of times to get through 25 reps. But as I continue to incorporate this on a more regular basis, I get a lot better and a lot stronger at it. So I don't have to stop and reset and rebalance as often, if at all. Sometimes I can make it through all 25 when I'm really consistent with this exercise. And that's the idea. That's the focus of doing these exercises, is to get your body accustomed to doing it properly. And if you are doing it properly, it gets used to it, and then it starts doing it right. And you're not falling all over the place because you have good core stability. Um, and one more Swiss ball, big exercise ball, Swiss ball exercise that I like to incorporate for core work, and also for like absolute pure frustration. If you want to be frustrated, this is the one for you. It's the Swiss ball tuck. So instead of being on your back, you are facing forward in like a plank position, sort of, with your knees, your shins on the ball in like a kneeling position, but you're inverted in this case, with your knees up. And then you kind of roll while you stay in that plank position with your hands now stabilizing you instead of your feet. Now it's your hands in like a push-up style position. And then you just kind of twist your body on the ball and then bring yourself back to center and then do it on the other side. I just roll all over the place. So I have to, again, what do we do when an exercise is too difficult to do at full range of motion? We bring back the range of motion. So I bring back the range of motion considerably, and I just do small twists to each side so that I can maintain position and balance. And sometimes I have to take a little break in there too, just in order to keep proper positioning and not teach my body how to do it in an incorrect way. So yeah, those are tough for me. Everybody's different. Every body is different. You might do that exercise and go, Coach Val, I don't know what you're talking about. These were super duper easy. And then you might do, something else and go, oh my God, that was so hard. So every body has different imbalances and different strengths and weaknesses, which is why there's all these different exercises in the book. So do what works for you. Okay, so here's a workout that I have been doing even before this second edition. I was doing this through the first edition. It's the workout is called hip runs, and I like this workout because there's some real flexibility. If you have a treadmill, that's is a great workout to do if you have a treadmill at home, because you're kind of going back and forth between running and doing these exercises. And the exercises require a big band, a big like loop band. And this is one of the big ones. Play with the distances in this workout. So it calls for doing half-mile runs in between hip circuit exercises. And then the last couple are 1-mile runs. So if you aren't doing that kind of mileage in a run, just bring back the mileage a bit on the running portion. So again, we're just bringing back the volume and intensity if necessary, based on your fitness level. But if you are, doing more running and, that works for you, perfect. So the way that it works is there's a warm up, and then there's a series of 4 hip exercises using that big band, in between quarter-mile intervals, and those quarter-mile intervals will build to either 80 or 90% effort. And then the last two intervals are 1 mile in distance, and you would incorporate at like half a dozen surges of 80 to 90% effort within that 1 mile time or distance. So it's kind of in a way, it kind of reminds me of a fartlek run with some exercises built in between, each distance. And the book urges the runner to pay attention to form whenever you're shifting gears. So that's kind of the idea of this workout. So you're doing the hip exercises and then you're getting back on, and then during your run, during these either surges or the increasing the effort up to your 80 or 90%, you're encouraged to really focus on your form as you're starting to increase that effort to your 80 or 90%. So that's the mental rewiring that you're working on here. And this is really more of a neuromuscular workout than it is like a training workout. So if you're in the middle of a training plan for a half marathon or a marathon, you might save this workout for off season. That would be a good time to do this type of work, is maybe in an off season base training or base building training time. The exercises are the kneeling band lift, the banded drive through, and the banded hip drag, and a twisted warrior. You see the twisted warrior everywhere. It's kind of like a yoga move in some ways. I can't remember what they call it in yoga. But again, if you have a treadmill and a place you can just set up the band, that's how I do it. So I set up the band in the hallway with the mat, and then I just, jump off the treadmill, do the 4 exercises, jump back on the treadmill, and just go back and forth. So if you have a setup like that, that's perfect. Okay, so mobile board. I'll talk a little bit about the mobile board. I use my mobile board every day, and I think I read something or I heard an interview with Jay Dicharry talking about the mobile board and how it's better to do multiple small sessions throughout the day rather than big, long marathon sessions of like 45 minutes on the mobile board. And I think he talks about this for other things as well, but this was specifically in the context of the mobile board. So what I've done is I've incorporated it as a way of getting up and moving throughout my day. So if you also are one of those individuals that sits a lot, or I have a standing desk. So right now I'm at my standing desk when I record these podcasts, but I'll go back and forth between sitting and standing all day long. However, I'm not training my foot while I'm just standing in one place. I've got both feet on the ground. And I'm standing. So what I'll do is I'll set a timer in my phone for every hour. It goes off and it reminds me to do a set of mobile board exercises. And they don't take more than a minute or two. So it's really brief, but it gets me moving and it also helps me incorporate training throughout the day. So I'll do foot rock exercises, which is where you put your foot in the slots, either 2 or 4, or 2 and 4, or 1 and 3. And I do 30 each direction. Then I switch over to the other foot, do the same thing, and then I'm done. So it just kind of gets me moving. I'll also incorporate star squats, which are like little mini squats. Going to the front, the side, and the back. So I'll do a few of those on each side. I'll also do little mini pistol squats, and these are not full range of motion pistol squats. That's not the point of it. It's really just to strengthen the foot, ankle, and knee mostly. Obviously there's the butt action in there, with the squat part. But I find them very helpful for strengthening my knees, particularly. Because you are going down and putting a lot of pressure on that knee joint to go down and then back up, but in a controlled fashion. So it's very good for strengthening your knees. And then I'll also do hip hikes, which is just basically, hip hikes are pretty common. Just you're standing on one foot, one hip goes down, then comes back up. It's a good way to strengthen the not only your foot that's standing, but also your glute med on the side that's doing the hip hike. And then I'll do banded abductors with just a little mini band, a little mini loop band around my ankles to strengthen some glutes. So anyway, those are the few that I incorporate throughout the day, and sometimes I change it up, but those are my basics. So, how can Running Rewired change your training? Um, there's a number of different things. So, number one, you can do what I did, which would be replace your dynamic warm up with one of the precision workouts, like the hip circuit or something that works for you. It's more effective warm up that is really specific to running. So when you run, you'll feel ready to run when you head out the door, rather than just a couple of I don't know, stretches like hamstring stretch or little jumping jacks or something that are really not running specific. So these are exercises that are very running specific to your muscles. And again, as a you know masters woman runner, we need to have a proper warm up. You cannot just take off and run out the door and expect not to get injured at this time of our lives. So all masters runners, but especially women, really need to make sure that their bodies are prepared for the effort that they're going to ask it to do. I say just cancel your gym membership. I haven't had a gym membership and I can't tell you how long. I think it was after my son was born, and he's now 23 years old. So it's been a long time since I've had a gym membership. Oh, I take it back. I did have a gym membership later. I forgot. I used to go and use the treadmill. Sorry, I fibbed a little bit there. But still, you don't need a gym membership. So um, if you don't want a gym membership, you don't have to have one. You don't have to do these exercises in the gym. Some of the exercises in the book show things like a big Olympic bar or a huge like barbell with a big weight on it. But there are ways that you can do those same exercises without that specific equipment and still get the same effect from it. So, what I use are kettlebells and hand weights for a lot of those things. You can also use a weighted bar. I have a big weighted bar, and you can get those in different weights. So, depending on the exercise that you're doing, there's absolutely equipment that is not huge or very expensive that you can have in your home and use that. So if you don't have a home gym, that's okay. If you have a corner, someplace to store your equipment, there's some basic equipment that you can get and still do all these exercises. Um, for example, the sling that I was talking about, or the suspension trainer, I keep calling it a sling, the suspension trainer. Um, you can attach that to a door with a door anchor, and it's not permanent. It's just goes into the door, you shut it, make sure you lock the door so nobody comes in while you're using it, um, and it stays put. Um, or you can also use a door frame pull-up bar. So I have a door frame pull-up bar, and the useful thing about that is that there's more space. So with a door hanger, you can't do some of these exercises because you need the suspension trainer right above you in order to do the exercise. You can't have a solid object right in front of you. So if you have a door frame pull-up bar, it's perfect. It just hooks right on that. You got a nice big open way. You put a mat down underneath you if you don't have carpet, and it works perfect. So there's ways that you can do this, and these are all things that I help people with if they need it. So let me know if you do need some help. But otherwise, if you haven't picked up the book yet, I've just given you a bunch of practical ways that you can use the information and exercises in the book and how I use them. And a lot of this I incorporate into people's plans when they come to me and they need warm ups or they need exercises and strength training. We also use it for corrective exercises when it's necessary or practical. So these are also corrective exercise tools that we can use if you find you have an imbalance or something like that. So anyway, that is what I have to say about the Running Rewired second edition. Hopefully it's been helpful for you today and you're super excited yourself about going out and getting the book and trying all the exercises. Or if you read them all and you get a little overwhelmed, reach out. Love to talk to you about that. Okay, well, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Running on Carbs podcast. I am Coach Val, and I hope that you have a fantastic day. And don't forget, go and run your best life on carbs. I'll see you next time.